Now, I'm not someone who pledges loyalty towards any specific gaming platform. I'm neither a PlayStation, Xbox, Nintendo, or PC conformist. I've always held the belief that if you're able to gain access to all of these platforms, then you can experience the best of all worlds. For example, as someone who appreciates physical media, I still see value in owning a PS5 and will purchase newly released games for their platform. But as someone who also advocates for Linux and values the freedom of customization and archiving that the PC environment provides, I also find myself playing a lot on my computer, in some instances even more than I do on my PS5. Which is why when I started hearing the news about PlayStation reportedly planning to walk back on porting their games to PC, it didn't exactly leave me excited. Now, I'm assuming when it comes to their live service games, they will most likely still port them to other platforms in order to expand their active player base, meaning that I presume they are mostly talking about single player games. Now, as much as I would like to say that I'm surprised about this news, thinking back, I feel like we should have anticipated that this would have eventually happened at some point. Now, I believe there are two perspectives that we need to account for. One is monetary and the other one is reputational. You see, when a console manufacturer chooses to make their first-party games exclusive to their consoles, the main reason people think of for why they would decide to do that is that they want more people to buy their consoles. And while that is true, it's only half of the reality. Because truth be told, if the only benefit a company like PlayStation would be getting by making their games exclusive is simply more people buying their consoles, then I don't think the incentive would be big enough. Simply due to the fact that in general, video game consoles are usually sold at a loss. There are some exceptions like the Nintendo Switch and possibly also the Steam Deck, but the PS5, in spite of the fact that it's been going up in price due to inflation, the money that they earn from console sales alone is not enough to offset the cost of manufacturing it. It's really through game sales and subscription services that they're able to subsidize the cost of manufacturing and selling their consoles. They bet on their player base spending money on third-party games to which they're able to profit through commissions, as well as their first-party games in which they're able to earn all of the revenue. Meanwhile, whenever they publish their games on other platforms like Steam, Epic, or GOG, they have to split the revenue with those storefront owners. Now, for a while, I think we all kind of assumed that by them porting these games on PC at a later date, they're able to at least secure full profits with no commissions during the initial sales by exclusively selling them on their platforms, and then later, either a year or several months from now, they can port those games on PC, earning however much they can from people who would be willing to purchase their first party games on PC. And even if they have to split the revenue with other storefronts, realistically they've made most of their money during the first few weeks, so it wouldn't be a major loss relative to the amount of money that they could potentially gain from the demand of these games getting ported to PC. And while in theory this point of view makes sense, they do have to account for three major concerns. Firstly, how much money are they actually earning? And is it enough to justify the cost of porting and advertising these games for the PC platform, as well as accounting for potential losses due to piracy? Secondly, how many people are buying these games on PC, and amongst these people, how many of them could have potentially bought them on PlayStation if that was the only option? Because while it is possible that some of these may never have bought these games in the first place had they not been made available on PC, at the same time there is an argument to be made that they could have been persuaded into buying them on PlayStation if there was no other way. Is that something that you can 100% prove? Probably not, but at the same time, when you say a company like Nintendo was able to foster a community of loyal fans who wouldn't even consider leaving their platform simply due to the fact that they lock their IPs to their platforms and do everything in their power to take down any projects to emulate their games on PC, it's very easy to make the argument that exclusivity is a powerful tool, because in contrast, we have a company like Xbox who for the past couple of years, they've been releasing their first party games simultaneously on Xbox and PC, and while I wouldn't say that that's the only reason for why the Xbox brand has been decaying, at the same time it's very easy to make the argument that someone wouldn't feel very compelled to buy an Xbox console if they knew that their games would be available on Steam, and most of their services including Game Pass are also available on PC with even more compelling pricing points. But beyond that, there's a third concern, and this is where we start to transition into the more reputational perspective. When you port your games to PC, regardless if you do it day one or a year from now, it creates this expectation for a lot of players that eventually their games are going to become available on PC. Therefore, they don't feel incentivized to buy it on PlayStation or even buy a PlayStation 5 console in the first place. And that does become a problem, especially with recent RAM prices, and even before that, for the past couple of years, there's been an increase in demand for silicon and computer chips. And to be clear, this is because of other sectors like data centers and AI farmhouses. So in general, computer parts have just been getting more expensive and will most likely continue to head in that direction. What this means is that if Sony wants to keep their consoles affordable and accessible, and don't get me wrong, with recent trends this is definitely gonna get a price increase at some point, but if they do want to maintain the strategy of selling their consoles at a loss, which they still are, I'm fairly certain, and allow games and service sales to subsidize these costs, the last thing that they can afford to do right now is to lose players who will choose to not buy their PlayStation consoles under the expectation that their games will get ported to PC. Another thing about all of this, and to be honest, this is something that I've been meaning to talk about for a while. You see, there's this Wikipedia article that a lot of people like to quote and expose just how very few exclusive games exist on the PlayStation 5 and how this was a point of criticism. Ironically, one of the games listed there is the Demon's Souls remake, and one game that people have been begging for years to get ported to PC is Bloodborne, and we all know that's most likely not going to happen anytime soon. But here's the thing. One problem that I've always had with people using this article is that it doesn't account for the first-party games that were released as cross-buy, as well as the games that were eventually ported to PC after some point. And because of that, it creates this misleading image of how many games have actually been developed for the PS5 platform. Don't get me wrong, I 100% believe we've been seeing significantly less games getting released as first parties compared to previous generations. Some of it is because production cycles have increased dramatically in recent years across all AAA studios. Additionally, Sony gambled on a lot of live service projects that eventually ended up getting cancelled, so it definitely is true that we have been seeing less games this generation, but quoting this article to represent the current state of next-gen exclusive games, not only does it not tell the full story, but it also sends mixed messages. Because if you're saying that this list should be bigger, what you're essentially asking is for PlayStation to both make more exclusivity deals with other developers and lock their first-party games to their consoles. And guess what? That's exactly what they're doing right now. So if you're one of the people lamenting that PlayStation is no longer porting their games to PC, meanwhile you've also claimed that there's no reason to own a PS5 and quoted this article as the reason for why, just know you have yourself to blame for that. Now personally, this isn't going to affect me too much because I'm already buying physical media, and it does at least give me more excuses to boot up my PS5 if you want to see that as a positive. So I wouldn't say that I'm like majorly upset by this news, but there is one big blow, and that's the fact that we may not end up seeing more of their titles getting published on GOG, which is something that they had started doing a few years back, and I was hoping that they would continue this trend because GOG is DRM free. But at the current state, if they're not even willing to port them on Steam, I highly doubt they're gonna care about GOG. But I don't know, if I had to suggest something, I would say maybe instead of porting their games to PC a year from now, they could just simply increase the cycle to maybe 5 years. I'm fairly certain that after that point, they're probably not even gonna regularly sell their games at full price anyway. But at the end of the day, it's up for them to decide, I guess. Anyway, that's really all I have to share. Take care.